What do you get when Paramount Pictures has a film that comes out of nowhere back in 2008 on a budget of $25 million, grossing a total worldwide haul of $172 million? Still having trouble?
You stupid son of a bitch!
Okay. What about a newly crafted franchise that puts much needed life and glory back into the monster genre? Well, the answer is simple. What you get is a sequel to that film 8 years later called 10 Cloverfield Lane. Dan Trachtenberg's directorial debut, 10 Cloverfield Lane was the highly anticipated sequel to Matt Reeves' found-footage monster flick, Cloverfield. 10 Cloverfield Lane takes the massive scope of Cloverfield and condenses it into an intimate tale of survival and dread. But the most interesting thing about 10 Cloverfield Lane isn't the possibility of being eaten by a tentacle hell monster straight from the depths of H.P. Lovecraft's nightmares. It's the metaphorical monster latched onto one's own soul that can manipulate control over others for their own sadistic glee. 10 Cloverfield Lane is a not-so-direct sequel to Cloverfield, giving very subtle hints that connect it to the first movie, straying away from the standard formula of sequels that we all dare to say become a little too repetitive for their own good. 10 Cloverfield Lane throws in a great ensemble cast, nerve-wracking tension, impeccable claustrophobic-inducing cinematography, and pesky bubbling acid that makes it into one of the best horror movies you never saw. "10 Cloverfield Lane" flew under everyone's radar when the teaser trailer debuted during the theatrical release of 13 Hours: The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi. You know, featuring that well-known dude from The Office, John Krasinski, and believe it or not, the other not-so-well-known dude from The Office, David Denman. The 10 Cloverfield Lane teaser is a perfect example of how movie marketing should be, using the track "I Think We're Alone Now," playing over 3 characters sitting on a couch with board games and assembling puzzles, dancing to a jukebox, sharing what appears to be some bonding between established family members. But then the trailer unravels to something much more sinister and darker in tone. It shows us a fire rising on the floor, someone being locked to a chain, an awesome shot of realizing the 3 members are inside a bunker, John Goodman looking nutty and putting a glove on next to a black barrel of unknown deliciousness, and that final payoff of Mary Elizabeth Winstead cracking Goodman on the head with a glass bottle and running up the stairs only to see what horror awaits her. The final payoff is all of us seeing that Cloverfield title as it fades from black and the end of the teaser guaranteeing us a long-awaited sequel. But was it the sequel that we deserved after so long? New to the directing game was 10 Cloverfield Lane director Dan Trachtenberg, who didn't really have much time in the command seat prior to this film. Trachtenberg had a couple of shorts called Kickin' and Portal: No Escape, and he was also one of the 3 hosts for the Totally Rad Show and served as a co-host of the Geek Drome podcast. So coming off these prior projects and not having much skin in the game, it's only fair to call this a Hollywood crapshoot with Dan Trachtenberg at the helm. With a script from Josh Campbell and Matt Stukin, which originated as a low-budget thriller, Oscar-winning Best Director Damien Chazelle, yes, the same man responsible for films like Whiplash, La La Land, and Babylon, came aboard to do a rewrite and was asked to direct the film. However, Chazelle turned it down due to Whiplash finally getting the budget it needed, and in came Dan Trachtenberg for the close. 10 Cloverfield Lane was on track for production, and J.J. Abrams' production company Bad Robot was joining the ride again in hopes of becoming another box office darling in the Cloverfield universe. 10 Cloverfield Lane starts us with a normal establishing shot of Louisiana where we meet our main protagonist, Michelle, played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead. We see she's in a rush to pack up some clothes and belongings as well as leave a beautiful engagement ring behind. We're traversing through open roads surrounded by trees and fields with Michelle in the long hours of the night. Her soon-to-be ex-fiancé Ben pleads with her to come back home, only to be denied one last time.
Come back.
Sorry, Bradley Cooper.
Share that with the Dalai Lama, jackass.
While Michelle is listening on the radio to the weird power surges hitting the southern border, her car gets hit off the road, and here begins Michelle's journey into eventual madness. Shortly after, Michelle wakes up from her beautiful slumber, only to find that she was chained up, wounded, and desperate for help. A man opens the door to her room, giving her food and telling her that she was saved by him and that she needed to regain her strength, while also supplying her some crutches. Michelle tries to subdue the man by starting a fire and hitting him with the sharp end of the crutch, only for Michelle to be subjected to the always handy anesthesia nap. Once she awakes, Michelle is informed that the United States was attacked by either Martians or Russians, resulting in nuclear or chemical fallout, and killing everyone. Howard, who introduces himself by name, found Michelle overturned on the road and says she must stay there for 1 or 2 years to avoid being exposed to the outside contamination. Michelle sleeps and wakes up leaving her room and meeting Emmett, another survivor played by John Gallagher Jr. While we're spending a lot of time in this bunker showing all of its many functionalities, it starts to become more and more apparent that our buddy Howard isn't who he seems. For Howard to make sure his guests believe his claims, he shows them CV radio with no outside communication, pigs that deteriorated from the fallout outside, and air-sealed doomsday doors. But Howard's jig is up when Michelle sees Howard's truck outside with paint marks on it. Michelle remembers a truck identical to Howard's swiping her off the road and causing her to do a few tumbles down the grass below. Emmett tells Michelle that he created the bunker with Howard and that he wasn't kidnapped, and that he witnessed the attacks firsthand, which results in Michelle starting to double think her quote-unquote kidnapping. During the film, you get to learn that even if Howard thinks his heroics are for the greater good, the underlying theme are the people you may know may be the monsters right in front of you. And it's not the extraterrestrial kind. Howard loses his cool several times throughout the film. Some of it as a result of Emmett's chatterbox mouth.
Bet you if we started a game right now, we might even get halfway through.
Stop talking.
Or Michelle becoming playful and flirtatious with Emmett, which is a tour de force scene with John Goodman.
Is that how you thank me for saving your life?
It's a good scene that shows just how paranoid, jealous, and malevolent Howard can be if he sees things that he doesn't like. Something is deeply troubling and boiling in Howard that has yet to be exposed. As the film eases down and Michelle starts to believe Howard with instances of random kindness and affection, a random woman appears outside the bunker with massive lesions across her face, pleading for help and to bring her in. Howard warns Michelle not to open the doors.
No! Don't open that door!
Michelle puts her full trust in Howard, and Howard also uncovers his past as being ex-military, having knowledge and experience as a US sailor that developed satellites.
Little trick I taught myself as a young man stationed on a ship with way too much free time.
You kind of think that maybe Howard isn't losing it and is telling the truth after all, but we soon learn that Howard is much more sinister underneath than we first noticed. He confides in Michelle by showing her a picture of his quote-unquote daughter, only to find out that the truth is that it's a missing person in the town that Howard lives in and that he later kidnapped her. Michelle comes to realize this when she's fixing a ventilation system and finds a misplaced earring with the word help carved into the skylight. Once loudmouth Emmett is disposed of by Howard, Michelle takes matters into her own hands and does a last-ditch effort to escape, resulting in Howard having a nice swim in some hydrochloric acid and eventually blowing up inside his bunker. Oof. The real turn of events is that we get more monsters, but in the extraterrestrial form, which brings us back to our Cloverfield connection. Even though we don't get the same monster from Cloverfield, we get something potentially in the same realm. It turned out our old pal Howard was telling the truth, and maybe he had something to do with the satellite that crashed at the end credits of Cloverfield. Rumors speculated that the satellite that crashed awoke the monster from Cloverfield in the ocean. Coincidence? You decide. The shining star of this film are its three main characters, carrying the weight of its basic premise and setting it on their shoulders. John Goodman of Roseanne and the Connors fame is the strong suitor here as Howard. He's an unpredictable force of nature, having more mood swings than a rebel angst teenager. There's a ferocity to Goodman, showing his trigger-pulling switch of malice in one scene or flipping into his ice cream eating and caring father figure to Michelle in another. This is one of Goodman's best roles on screen, right up there with The Big Lebowski, Arachnophobia, and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Mary Elizabeth Winstead also has a solid history of films, right up there with 10 Cloverfield Lane. She became a breakout in Disney's Sky High, an actually pretty good movie, then joined good old John McClane in Live Free or Die Hard. She also became MacReady incarnate, scientist Kate Lloyd in 2011's The Thing prequel with Joel Edgerton, or who could forget Ramona Flowers in the always amazing Scott Pilgrim vs. the World with Michael Cera. Mary Elizabeth Winstead was in this film for 100% of it, showcasing her acting talents for the world to see in a good foil to John Goodman's Howard. And then there is John Gallagher Jr., who plays the good-hearted merc with a mouth, Emmett. Gallagher Jr. is no stranger to horror, as he was in a solid slasher film called Hush on Netflix, and he was also in the chaotic corporate building killfest, The Belko Experiment, which also starred Michael Rooker, Tony Goldwyn, and John C. McGinley. John Gallagher Jr. is always a solid role player wherever he pops up, making his role in 10 Cloverfield Lane just as memorable. 10 Cloverfield Lane was only a 2-month shoot, which is extremely quick as it was only in one setting. After the dust settled on its theatrical release, it went on to gross $110 million at the global box office on a budget of just $15 million, proving another successful win from Paramount and Bad Robot. Dan Trachtenberg also won the Outstanding Direction for First Time Directing by the Directors Guild. Critical reception for 10 Cloverfield Lane is exceptionally strong at 90% on Rotten Tomatoes with a 79% audience score. Peter Travers of Rolling Stone says, quote, "The movie comes loaded with everything a psychological thriller needs to shatter your nerves, and then kicks it up a notch," end quote. With Fangoria magazine stating the following, "Goodman's swing from concern to rage and back are perfectly tempered every time, and Howard stands as both a great modern genre anti-hero and a new high watermark on the actor's resume." 10 Cloverfield Lane is a must-see horror film. Even if you don't watch Matt Reeves' Cloverfield, it perfectly succeeds on its own merit as a standalone. What I do recommend, however, is skipping the Cloverfield Paradox entirely, which debuted on Netflix with more of a whimper than a bang. The Cloverfield Paradox was supposed to supply us with all the answers that were needed to close this universe. However, it left it more muddied than it ever intended. 10 Cloverfield Lane is quite simply a well-executed, perfectly balanced thriller that has a strong ensemble. The viewer is left wondering if Howard is a straight-up psychopath with doomsday survivalist tactics, or someone who is intending to save as many people as he can for his own good. Maybe he was looking for the perfect female in the apocalypse to build his own family with? I don't know. Maybe it's a bit of everything, and when it lands on that final frame showing us bigger troubles that await Michelle on the road to Chicago, maybe she should have stayed in that bunker after all.